Well, I'm standing in front of a blackberry patch. Blackberries are actually related to raspberries. They are all a part of this, the genus Rubus, R-U-B-U-S. And depending on which person you would talk to, and with Rubus, most people don't talk like that. They just call them blackberries and raspberries. And then when you put blackberries and the raspberries together, the whole entire group is called brambles, and that's why folks will say, oh, you know, a bramble production guide. A bramble production guide would include both blackberry and raspberry production. Blackberries are kind of very interesting, especially after polar vortexes that we had experienced in 2014. Most of our blackberry varieties are really not that cold hardy. We found out the hard way, and as many folks in other states, and when you have a very cold season, what's going to happen is all of the canes on top, in this case, you can tell the canes grew very well, and some of the canes were just simply killed, and then fruits that did not get a chance to fully develop. So in terms of blackberry production, the first thing I would worry about is cold hardiness. So how do you deal with that? And if you look at this particular planting very closely, this is actually a winter hardiness study, and everything was planted about 3 years ago, and we actually did not know we were going to get polar vortexes. So it was I always tell folks it's better lucky than good, and so in this particular plot, and we had three or four of our common varieties. We have Chester, thornless, which is one of the most cold hardy varieties that we have, and then we have a couple of Arkansas varieties, Natchez and Washita, and both are not as are known not to be as hardy as Chester. So for home gardeners, and if you were to grow blackberries, I would say the first variety I would select is Chester. So what's good about it? And first thing is, it's cold hardy, so you can get a crop. So you can get some blackberries to make blackberry cobblers with. So is it the best tasting variety? Well, it's probably not. Does it produce the biggest berries? And probably not. But it's cold hardy, and it's one of our most popular commercial varieties. So my number one variety is Chester, and then other cold hardy varieties, and yes, for example, Illini hardy, it's pretty good, and then Doyle's is pretty good, thornless. So I would say those are the hardy ones, but if you have a very bad winter, like the polar vortexes that we experienced, so most of them will not do that well. But anyway, so those are so the Chester would be the variety I would start out with, and then the next one would be Triple Crown. During most years, Triple Crown will come through with a crop, and then the berries are much better tasting, and so that would be my second, or depending on which one you are looking at. So Chester would be number one, Triple Crown would be my number two, and then once you go beyond the shock of polar vortexes, and then getting a little bit more optimistic, and then you go like, okay, what about some of the tenderer varieties? And I would say Washta and the Natchez, and those are my two tenderer varieties, and both of them are very tasty, and then they produce very large berries. So blackberry varieties, and so that would be my top four. And then if you want to go beyond four varieties, and then the fifth one would be Apache, and then after that Navajo, Arapaho, and a few others. A few other varieties. Those are all what's called the thornless blackberry varieties. And well, if you want to go, if you want to select the thorny ones, and then those are not necessarily recommended because they're much more difficult to harvest, much more difficult to grow. Anyway, so there are a few varieties, and you can refer to different catalogs for those, but I definitely like the thornless blackberries a whole lot better because they're much easier to manage. And see, like Chester here, and I could touch the canes and grab them without getting myself poked, or without getting my hands all bloody. So what about the planting site? And as you can tell, this is full sun, so blackberries could use full sun. Actually, a little bit partial shade in a protected area, blackberries will still do quite well. So a little bit partial shade doesn't really hurt blackberries that much. Raised beds is also a must. In this case, we used a landscape fabric, so you can control weeds, and then this was a raised bed, so it will be good. We have improved soil drainage. What about cross-pollination? Blackberries don't really need two different varieties for cross-pollination, so you can have one blackberry bush, and you can have a full crop, but as long as you have honeybees or bumblebees for cross-pollination. And then planting site, and typically we're looking at more of a slightly acidic soil, while we would like to have loamy soil, decent organic matter content, maybe about 1.5% to 2%. And then the pH of about I would say 6 to 6.5, and definitely lower than 7.0. But anyway, and then depending on the variety, some varieties are what's called erect, and so they can stand up on their own without any kind of trellis. But even the erect varieties, and you still it will still be beneficial to have some kind of post to keep them straight, and then the trellis, because erect varieties, and sometimes strong wind can actually break off the canes, and once the canes are broken off, and then you won't have much of a crop. Blackberries are similar to raspberries, and their canes are biennial in nature. So what's going to happen? See, like in this case, you have one long cane that grew very tall, and then our research assistants topped them just slightly above our top wire, and then you can see that we have quite a few laterals. And then next March, we're going to come back, and we're going to shorten them a little bit, depending on the diameter of the laterals. And if the laterals are very nice and long and kind of pencil size, and we'll trim them back to about the foot. If it's kind of skinnier, we'll probably trim them back to about maybe 8 to 9 inches. So typically the canes will come up and very nice and tall, and you top them, you are going to get a lot of laterals. Actually, if you could maybe this is a good example of a very long lateral. For commercial growers, and we really, commercial growers don't really like the laterals kind of too low on the cane, because the fruits will be too low to the ground. So ideally, I would like to see these kind of laterals, kind of like this guy here. Like this guy. They're a little bit up on the cane, so when you cut them back, the fruits will be kind of at the more comfortable picking height. Ideally, they would probably be about here. So when you harvest the berries, you will have much less trouble of reaching them. But oftentimes, for those folks who have harvested blackberries, and the blackberries that are kind of hidden inside, the nice black and glossy ones are actually the best tasting varieties. And then let's kind of briefly talk about disease control a little bit. And blackberries do get several diseases, and one of them is called king blight, and another one is called orange rust. Orange rust, and you can just Google orange rust of blackberries. That particular disease is very hard to control. It's systemic, which means once you get the fungal disease, it's pretty much all over the plant. And then you also potentially can get orange rust from one plant to the next. So once one plant gets orange rust, and we pretty much just, our recommendation is plant removal. So you can yank out the plant, and then well, that's the bad news. The good news is orange rust it's not soil-borne. So you can yank out the plant, and then you can plant another blackberry bush in the same spot, and because it's not soil-borne. And then king blight and other diseases, fungal diseases, and you can still control them with a fungicide spray. And most gardeners don't really like spraying pesticides on blackberries, but one spray I definitely recommend is the dormant spray of lime sulfur. You definitely wanted to do that before the buds start sprouting, and then once you do that, then you pretty much coat everything kind of all really white. And that's an organic spray, and then you will kill a lot of fungal spores, and you will keep diseases from developing. So if you don't like spraying blackberries, then I would at least make one spray, and other sprays are still recommended, but for home gardeners, lime sulfur spray to me is a must. Well, depending on which person you talk to, if you are the one who does the spraying, and actually lime sulfur does smell pretty bad, and it has a rotten egg kind of smell. But make sure you wash your hands and wear clothing or clothes that you don't really care about. Otherwise, you won't smell very good. And then insects. There are a few, and they also blackberries are also highly attractive to Japanese beetles, and so with Japanese beetles, what you need to do is you need to either catch the first a few Japanese beetles and kind of do what you do with roses, and you catch them, or even oak leaf hydrangeas. You catch them, beat them into a bucket with soapy water, and then get rid of the first ones. And then once you do that, hopefully you will have fewer Japanese beetles. But if you see a few on the plants, then I would definitely apply insecticides. 7 would be pretty good, and then some of our pyrethrins are quite effective. The main thing is to control the early Japanese beetles, and then make sure you catch them before the second wave comes in. Otherwise, they can strip the leaves pretty bad. So Japanese beetles, and then More recently, there's a new insect. It's called spotted wing Drosophila. Spotted wing Drosophila is called a vinegar fly. Some people call it a fruit fly. It's actually not a fruit fly, even though it attacks fruits. It's called a vinegar fly. Spotted wing Drosophila. What it does is it will get into the developing fruits, and then the fruits will soften and without before they ripen. So you will see a little larvae in the blackberries. So an insecticide application, as soon as the berries turn color, will be very, very beneficial. And there are different types of insecticides. I would select the ones that have a very short pre-harvest interval. So make sure you control or Google spotted wing Drosophila, and you know what you are dealing with, and hopefully you won't have that problem. But when you do, you can control spotted wing Drosophila by an application of insecticide. And blackberries are definitely a lot of fun to grow, and then we have a lot of good varieties for you, and hopefully you will grow a lot of blackberries that will be for your put in your ice cream, or you can make cobblers and pies and all that good stuff.